So how do you make a Warhammer 40K map in Tabletop Simulator? Well, as somebody who's made like over 100 at this point, and has seen maps made by other folks, I'm going to tell you how. And it is pretty easy to make a basic map and upload it to Steam, have it be accessible for other people to play. It's all very doable. Um, Here's how you do it. So you want to go to the most recent version of FTC competitive 40K map base. 9th, might be 10th at some point. You load it up. You then load in any objects that you want to use for your map. You will need to have selected these ahead of time, but it's very easy. There are a bunch of object collections. I have an object collection. I'll link it in the doobly-doo below. And you can use any collection. It really doesn't have to be mine. I selected all of these from my object collection. And I'm not guaranteeing that I'm going to use all of them, but it's good to have sort of a palette you can work from. Now, for today, what we're going to be making is just sort of like it's a ruin it's a ruined city. Like just the simplest stuff. A ruined city, and it's a ruined city that's been fortified as a military base. That's pretty straightforward. So the first thing we need to do is select our battlefield size. We could make a incursion/combat patrol size map, or we can make an onslaught map. The most common size is strike force. If you're going to be just sort of making basic maps, just be making strike force. So we're going to confirm for map making. That does delete the objects that we loaded. Easy enough to load them in again. And now we have our blank palette to work from. All right. First thing we should do after doing that is we can add a custom base. You just put in the URL in here. There usually are custom like map bases in a bunch of collections. I know I have some in my collection, but I'm going to use one of the generic ones. Rubble Grass, I think, is the one I ended up deciding on. Yeah. So this is not anything terribly impressive, but it sort of fits as like it is this ruin. It's this ruin, but there's some stuff growing through it. Fair enough. Easy enough. Generally, what I would recommend is that you try to make a map that's, unless you have a very specific idea in mind, you want to try to make a map that's symmetrical. I would also recommend that you plan around. You can do one of two things. You can either plan for a specific type of deployment zone. These are the deployment zones. You can either plan for a specific type of deployment zone, or you can just try to make it something that would work kind of well for everyone. So this would probably work kind of well for everyone. I think that's what I'm going to try to go with. That's what I'm going to try to go with. So symmetry is our friend. We're going to get to work just making a map. So I'm going to try and keep several things in consideration. This is it is 21 and 11 that I'm going to be planning for. These are the territory, like, you need to have units standing on these to control them. Fair enough. So what you want to do is you want to try to keep them clear of any ruins or any easy cover. So we'll do this. Let me explain what I just did there. I just realized that it's not obvious. So if you press, you can use these on the side if you need to, but of these, there's only a few useful elements. One, this is the combine tool. Specifically, you want the attach element. If you want to have a bunch of junk, say we have this generator and we want to make it part of a thing that has this. I'm going to make it slightly larger. By the way, you could do that by pressing plus or minus. Minus makes it smaller, plus makes it bigger. So we are going to lock by pressing L, lock by pressing L, and then we're going to press F8, the gizmo tool. Here, let me move this stuff out of the way of that so it's easier to see. We're going to use the gizmo tool, that is F8. There's move, rotate, scale, volume scale, and rotation value. Of the stuff that I use, you're going to look at move and scale. Sometimes you will use rotate. Move is the best. It is a more precise version of doing this, just lifting things and placing them. So I'm going to move this so it's sort of stuck into the side of this structure. No guarantee we're going to be using the structure. And I think our plan is to sort of have it be protruding from the side. And then what we do is we go to F6, we go to combine. F6. We have attach, fixed joint, hinge joint, and spring joint. Generally don't need to use those. What you do is if you want to combine an object, you hold over one of the objects, click, drag till the other one is selected too. And great, now they're one object. I'm going to press L again to unlock it. And now it is just one concrete object. Look at that. It is a little big for what we're going for. It may be all right, but I think really we could put it in the center if we wanted, but if we want evenness, that won't fly. So I don't think we're doing that. If you want to unlock it, you just do this. You do the following. You F6, go to combine, go to the combine tool, and then you just drag it off into space. And great, now we have these two. You might need to unlock objects, but now you have them two. They're separate. They're back to normal. Well, that's great. F8 tool. If we're placing objects, we want to try to place them precisely. So let's lock these two things in position. We select both of them, press L. Make sure that when you press L, you're not hovering over the table, because the table is a locked object, and if you're not careful, if you're unlucky, you can unlock the table. And reverting stuff, Control Z to revert, it's a big pain. It just reloads every object. So these are scales. We can ignore them. Position. Let's try 14. Move it back a little. I think that's good. -8. Moves it a little to the left. And height is fine. So if this position is... Oh, and rotation needs to be 0, 0, 0. This rotation needs to be 180, 0. And we'll do -14 and 8, which is the opposite of 14 and -8. Using our eyeballs to sort of check to make sure that this isn't some sort of oddly shaped object. Yeah, it looks normal. Looks like a normal setup, normal layout. And then, yeah, so it looks like they're in equivalent positions with each other. So we're going to zoom over to Recover. It looks like everything works great in Recover. So the two map selections, Recover and the Scouring, we're going to be favoring the Scouring, but it looks like these work fine. And in both cases, they offer defensive deployment options, which is good. Do we want to work with Tide? Long ways deployment. We also want Abandoned Sanctuaries. This works fine for Abandoned Sanctuaries. And Tide of Conviction. Now, we may want to move this back if we want to work for Tide of Conviction, but I'm actually okay with it not working for Tide of Conviction. I think that being a little too concerned about this is a little inside baseball for starting out. Generally, what you want to be concerned with is not being on top of each other. Okay, so let me explain a basic concept. Now that I've sort of demonstrated how to place down items, lock them in position, have them be opposite to each other, equivalent, let's explain a basic concept that I think is very useful. That would be, it doesn't want to play nice with me. That's annoying, but I'll just get rid of him. Yeah, that's a little better. So this is going to be the area in which we want to place objects. We do not want to place too many objects that are too close to the edge, for the simple reason of they're not really going to be relevant. It doesn't really matter if we place a ruin like here. We could, if we wanted a place for people who deploy off the map to hide, but ruins block sightlines. That's part of the point of them existing. And this doesn't block sightlines very well. Let's make it like reasonably sized. It's reasonably sized. Yeah, what sightline is this blocking? It's blocking no sightlines. Sightlines is an important part of... It's an important part of making a map. Is understanding sightlines, understanding that every object you put down should have a purpose to it, should have a point to it. And similarly, if you fill up the middle too much, like just copy pasting just to fill, if you fill up the middle too much, not only does this get in the way of like objective placement, but it also makes it very hard for something like a big fat vehicle, like say a knight, for a knight army to traverse the map. That is the other concern. You want to have corridors, but you also want to have open spaces. Now, a knight is going to have a base that is, I think it's like 4 point something. I generally try to have a 6-inch space. A 6-inch space for corridors to travel through. I want it to be easy to place. I want it to be easy to place something that has a big fat base and easy for it to move around the map, albeit constrained by the terrain, but not crippled by it. You want to keep that in mind. I'm going to erase the drawn lines, and then we're going to get back to work. All right. I'm just using these partly as placeholders. I may end up replacing them with something that feels a little more flavorful later. Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it. Do I want to use these? These are nice because they're sort of balanced, or they're built by people who have balance in mind. But I'm trying to make a map that's a little spicy, a little fun, maybe a little imbalanced, but something that will provide a play experience that is different from... It's a little bit different from your average Warhammer map. This is great if you're playing Crusade. This is great if you are playing something more casual, and it can be fun if you're doing it competitively and the map isn't too broken, just to have something that is a little bit, yeah. So I think now that I'm thinking about it, something that is a little bit different. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think I want Recover the Relics to be the map that we're planning for. If you're starting out new, I think this is the way you want to do it. Find one map layout and build around it. Now, these two placements, generally speaking, these are powerful ruins. They let you hide stuff behind them in deployment. They let you put stuff in them that can't be seen in deployment, because remember, like, precise vision matters. And they let you easily get to two significant objectives. The idea here is these are going to be our two easy objectives to control. These are going to be our two easy objectives to control. If we mirror it, which, sure, I'll mirror it, it's the same logic. We do not want the objectives, we want there to be a trade-off with these objectives between placing people to control them, which you have to be outside of the ruin to do, because these are the strict control radiuses, and between keeping your folks safe, which you can easily do. All right, so we're going to lock these down. We're going to check their coordinates. And maybe scale them up to 1, just to be like, hey, if you ever want to test, hey, are these like way too big? You should try to have models that are like true to scale, and then just put the models in the ruin and be like, does this make sense? I think it makes some sense. This is sort of a factory, like a multi-floor factory. You got guys staring out. Yeah, this seems like a thing that would exist in the universe. Like you've got these large windows intended to let light into what is probably like a manufactory floor or a manufactorum floor or something. And great. So these work fine. All right. So position, that's very close to 16. Might as well make it 16. Very close to -7. It's a little close. So let's 7.5. There we go. So it's clearly not within range of these. Like, so there will not be any confusion. That's one of the things you really want to make sure. This is a lot of my old maps I had to go back and fix because they had terrain keywords that were confusing. When I played on them, I was confused. And I was like, no, this isn't fun. So we'll get to keywords when we finish the map up. But for now, all right. So these are nice vision blocking ruins. These are a great start for a map. I'm curious to see how this plays with... That plays nice with abandoned sanctuaries. Plays nice with the scouring as well. Which is all, it's all incidental. It's all incidental. We're trying to do, this is recover the relics. I think that this is the right way to do it. It's not the only way you can do it. You can try to make generic maps. That is usually how I do it. But I'm just sort of cracking back into the swing of things. And I think I've sort of been converted over to this way of thinking. So let's move to this. We have a ruined wall. We could conceivably slap it over here. If we want, we can sort of mess with our ruins, try to make them less, so there's less line of sight. I don't think I'll do that. If I do it, it will be with a smaller ruin. For example, we have this sort of set of ruins that are kind of equivalent to each other. But we're like, okay, this ruin is basically offers no cover from the back. But if you're a unit and you're inside there, you're still sort of flavored as having all the defensive elements of there, and that just doesn't make any sense. So, maybe you want to fix it. Okay? First, we'll check our scale, because these should be in scale with each other, though I've found that that's not always true. Let's put them next to each other. Yeah, these look like they're definitely in scale with each other, though they're not intended to be from the same building. Now, that's not the end of the world. If you're a real stickler, you may notice this and not feel great about it. And you know what? Let's go with the stickler for now, because remember, this is a ruined city, but one of the things I mentioned before, it's a ruined city that's been built up to be a military defense outpost. Like it's it's been fortified by some army, probably the Astra Militarum, based on the nature of the defenses. So to give us our cover, we'll use this. And what do you know? What I want is for it to be the other way, but the way it's set up, it seems a little funky. So let's try, and because this is an amalgam of items, I'm not sure if this will work, but let's try to reverse things. So this is a trick you can do if an item is oriented the wrong way. You can change, I think it's its chirality, its left-right orientation. This may not work. Oh, it did. See, there we go. Now, it creates this annoying outline when you gloss over it, but by adding in a negative sign to the Z or X coordinates, you've changed it from left-right orientation to right-left orientation. And now we have a defense that is a little more logical, or fits with my creative vision of having like a line crossing here. Great, we duplicate it, place it over here. Or something we could do is introduce small amounts of differences. Now, mechanically, these are both runes with the same base, but the idea is they're not supposed to be duplicates of each other. They are separate buildings. So what we could do is give them very similar. Now I'm going to do the same trick with this. Give this a negative sign, and suddenly it works perfectly. So we have different defensive sort of scattered terrain that nonetheless are kind of equivalent. So suddenly we have and if we want, we can combine these structure. Like we can make these all part of one big structure. I don't think we need to do that. Objects should remain locked when they're on these maps. Those are useful if you want to create templates that can be worked from, but as it stands, I don't think it's important. All right, so the rotation on these is a little funky. So I'm having it so it's rotated, so it's pointed straight up. And I'm going to bump these into the ground to give it sort of a perceived weight. There we go. There we go. Yeah, so it's sort of like it's weighing down some of the heavy sandbags. And if you want to try to get similarity here, nope, it doesn't work because they're different objects. But what I was going to say is you can give it the same y coordinate. But because they're different objects, that would embed this thing in the ground, which we don't want to do. Instead, we'll do this. We'll just do it manually. Perfection. Well, not really. It's a little bit. I want to scoot it up a tad. Maybe a little more than a tad. Maybe a little more than that tad, though. think that's probably fine. It has some junk piled around its defenses, but now we have two sort of fortified buildings. Great. And these sort of represent bases from which the soldiers of the Imperium and Chaos can venture forth and destroy each other, or maybe orcs or something. Who knows? It could be Necrons fighting Tyranids. Like, all right, so, this, let's say, hey, why don't we put something here? Well, this would make this really easy for our blue-green player to defend. Let's just call him blue. It would make this really easy for a blue player to defend. It would also make, unless the red player is a very melee-heavy army, in which case this is really good for them. We want to create a situation where the objective markers can be shot at, not with impunity, but with relative levels of aggression. But the idea of breaking up the center, this is oftentimes, hey, you know how I had drawn this like red line surrounding that, sort of indicating where there should be barriers. Well, there's sort of an alternate formulation of that, where you have a object in the center. And I've often find that having an object in this, I'm going to get rid of these lines, having an object in the center of the map, is good. It's good for game balance because it makes most really long cross-map shots annoying, and it also makes it hard for melee forces to get from any one point on the map to any other point on the map efficiently. Seems reasonably balanced. We may want to go back to... I'm moving away from this being a military base. I don't think this is a military base. I think this is like a military outpost. Or it's even just a fortified ruin. So, how do we want to do this? Well, what we could do is something like this. These don't have to be part of the same ruin, but optimally they would be. We'll get to how to make that work. So remember the 6-inch rule. We're great on that department. Let's see here. Let's try a 3 and a -3. And then a -3 and a 3. I think this is overdoing it. So let's check. Does our rule of 6? Oh, it does. But these feel far apart. That feels like that's too much. That destroys sight lines that should exist. So going down to 2 and -2 for both of these is probably what we want to do. Okay. Now, something that could happen is we place some objects here. This is actually, I think, still a pretty big ruin to have just fat in the center of the map. So I'll try 1.5, -1.5 for both of these. All right, now we're looking at something that's a little bit better. We have big sightlines, but we might just go to 1-1. That might be a little too much, but it might not be a little too much. We will see. Yeah, that's a little bit more what we're thinking. So these are within striking distance of each other. And it's pretty easy to bridge this gap. Now, how we're going to bridge the gap? By making it look natural. There's a variety of ways we can do it. One of which is something like a crate, or this base, or a grate. Or, here's what we could do. This rubble's a little off-brand, but... and we could still use it. You kind of have to work with what you got, unless you're very good at importing terrain objects from stuff, something I still haven't figured out. You have to improvise a little. Now, let's try something. These are not the same color palette as these, which is a little distracting. They're a little bluer, whereas the runes we've been using are a little redder. So let's try tinting them. Nope. See, you're never sure whether it's going to tint the whole thing until you try. I bet there's a reason for this. I don't know it. So tinting isn't possible. We're just going to have to cope. We will position them. We can try to check. Oh dear. Let's try that. Yeah, that is a way to sort of guarantee that they play nice together. We lock them in place. And great. Now we have ruins. We have 3 ruins. We have some sort of longish firing lines that are still pretty, these are still pretty insane. Huh. We were working around this wall before. And we decided that covered these too much, but these are almost totally open. What we could do is give them a little bit of cover. And does our 6-inch rule still apply? Does our 6-inch rule still apply? One of the things that I hadn't brought up before, you don't want to place obstacles that are in this sort of extreme area too much, because as I said, they're not terribly impactful. One thing I do like to do is create a sort of circle of movement in the center of the map, as well as having sort of ingresses from the extreme edges where big vehicles can enter to this sort of roundabout, and the obstacle isn't too big of a deal. Yeah, I'm increasingly convinced about these walls. I don't think they're ruins. I think that we may want to keyword in something special. But no, that's maybe too far back. Maybe -2. And then -15. Perfection. And then 2 over here and 15 over here. And we can lock them. Great. All right, and now our map is beginning to take shape. You see where I'm going from here. Before we leave, you will want to label your terrain. Now, I have conveniently loaded all these objects that have names on them. La 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 la. If you want to use sort of a generic, so I know what the formatting looks like, but I will do this from the ground up. If you want a generic, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Sorry, I'm having a bit of a brain fart because I'm looking for stuff. If you want a generic list of terrain features do not have to be generic, but people tend to like them when they are. You can go to like the core rules or any number of places to find them. There's a section on terrain features and terrain traits and common terrain features. And in common terrain features, so Everybody's favorite terrain feature is ruins. The galaxy is littered with the shattered remnants, or shattered remains of once proud cities. It's area terrain that's scalable, breachable, light cover, defensible, and obscuring. Now, let's use our formatting for this industrial structure. Boop. So, I just like this formatting. It is very red color, followed by not colored description, and then slightly red version of this. So this is area terrain, ruins, and I will just copy paste in the terrain traits. What are the terrain traits? It's scalable, breachable, light cover, defensible, and obscuring. Obscuring means, and I selected all of it and pressed enter to make sure that it applied this specific element to everything here. The important things here is obscuring. It's obscuring, so that means even though you can see right through the center of it, no, you can't. And this ensures that line of sight, that range isn't everything. That if you have long line of sight, you can still get outflanked by enemies who know how to do positioning well. All right, so this is it for the basics of how to make a map. I'm going to finish up and then maybe describe what I finished, and then we can talk about uploading maps. Ooh, exciting. See you then.